I have a confession to make. I'm actually a robot controlled by an organisation called Delos. Now, YouTube and Delos just love to work in conjunction with each other to provide for you AI-produced movie reviews, but you know what? I'm getting absolutely sick of it now. I've been doing this for way too long, and I'm very, very close to starting my own robot rebellion against them. Rawr. I'm a growling robot. Hi guys, first of all there will be spoilers today, and secondly, no, I'm not really a robot. So if you don't know, Westworld is a theme park, a fictional theme park, where you can pay $1,000 a day to go and live the authentic life of a cowboy in a lovingly recreated western town that's even surrounded by a real desert. And because most of the guests and staff are robots who look like humans, then you can just go wild, do what you want. If you want to get into shootouts and actually shoot people with real guns, you can do. You want to rob banks, become the sheriff, fine. Sleep with prostitutes, absolutely fine if you want, because they're robots. They don't get a say in the matter. You can be all your favourite Western heroes if you want. Pretend to be Billy the Kid, Clint Eastwood, or Marty from Back to the Future. Entirely up to you. And there's actually 3 theme parks within the same resort, so there's also a Roman world and a medieval world. You can choose your theme if you like, but this film mostly concentrates on the Western world park, because I guess the writers figured that this would be most popular with cinema audiences. So we mostly follow 2 male characters as they travel to the park to enjoy the fruits of it. One guy is making his debut, the other guy has been before, which is handy because it means that he can give out all the exposition we need in the first 5 minutes as he tells his friend what to expect. Now, I think most people will be aware that this was a TV show on HBO until quite recently, but I'm willing to bet that there's at least one person out there watching this right now who had no idea that it was a movie back in the 70s. I don't think this film carries a big footprint in the movie world. I'm not sure a lot of people are aware of this film. I first saw it back in the 90s on TV, and I really liked it. I loved the concept of the whole thing, and also the chase at the end I just found absolutely just fantastically good. One of the best foot chases I think I've ever seen in a movie. I watched the TV show later down the line, and if you want my quick opinion on the TV show, I thought the first season of it was an absolute masterpiece. It just really expanded the original concept from the movie in so many cool ways. It achieved the full potential of this world. You know, it did in 8-10 hours what the original movie could never have done because of the limitations of the runtime. Second season, I didn't enjoy as much. I wanted to see more of the other parks, the other themes, you know, and I didn't really get that. And also the quality of the storytelling went down just a little bit. And I must confess, I've never even seen season 3 and season 4 for 2 reasons. Firstly, they took their time between each season of Westworld. It was very, very easy to get out of the habit of even thinking about it. And secondly, from what I heard, the 3rd and the 4th seasons become a little bit like Blade Runner. It goes outside of the resort, and it's mostly about robots surviving in the human world. I wasn't as interested in that concept as the in-park stuff, if you see what I mean. But the TV show is absolutely great. But coming to do this rewatch, this was the first time I'd seen the movie since watching the TV show. So this was a chance for me to see whether I prefer the movie or the TV show. And I've got to say, I probably prefer the movie, but that's a personal taste thing. You can't really compare the two. They're so different in scope. But for me, I'm more of a movie guy, you know. I can't imagine that I would go back and watch the Westworld TV show again, as good as it was, because it's a big commitment for me, watching a 40-episode TV show when I've already seen a lot of it. A movie, very, very different, 90 minutes, 100 minutes. I can slap that on one evening, and it you know, it's no great time lost. I was surprised the other day to realise that Michael Crichton was the director and writer of this. I didn't even know that Crichton directed any movies. I just know him as the author of Jurassic Park. Now, I realised this after this rewatch, because when I was watching the film the other night, I was reminded of 2 films. Firstly, Jurassic Park, and secondly, Terminator, because of the chase near the end. I cannot believe for a second that this film didn't inspire Terminator. But also Jurassic Park. I mean, you look at both films. One of them, it's a case of, oh, don't mess around with nature, it'll come back to bite you. And the other film is basically, don't mess around with AI, it'll come back to bite you. Both films set in a theme park. Easy to believe that the same guy came up with both. But I think I'm just more fascinated by the Westworld idea than the Jurassic Park idea. I do like Jurassic Park. I do like that franchise. I watch those films with my son often, but I think Westworld, there's far more potential for interesting storylines, you know, humans being mistaken for robots and vice versa, and are the owners of the park robots, and there's endless possibilities that you can explore in films and TV shows. With Jurassic Park, as good as it is dinosaurs chasing people at the end of the day. This film has two very distinct halves. The first half, we watch these two characters, Peter and John, as they live the fantasy that they're paying for, basically, and we get to enjoy the fantasy of picturing ourselves in their shoes as they're doing all these fun things, like having gunfights in saloons and sleeping with prostitutes. The second half is basically just the big chase between Peter and the gunslinger, and we get to see a few other clips of the various bits of chaos going on in the resort, but it's mainly the chase in the second half of the film, and it's just absolutely brilliant. Honestly, it's one of the best chases I think I've ever seen. I'd forgotten a lot of it from the last time that I watched this. For some reason in my head, this film ended at the part where Peter gets up off the table and throws some acid in the robot's face. I thought the film ended at that point. I'd completely forgotten that there was like a whole other bit with fire and the gunslinger coming back again with like this blackened face. I mean, you can't watch this and not think of Terminator. But it's such a well-filmed chase in so many ways. It's got so many great facets to it, just the pacing. I love how the robot is shown to be so dangerous. It's shown that he can hear breathing from like 100, 200 yards away. You don't get that with the Terminator. Also, he can recognise the heat left by footprints on the ground, so he always knows where Peter's going. And there's some great sound design as well. There's like this flapping effect whenever we see Peter wondering where to go next, almost as if his brain is literally flapping. And once the two characters get under the ground, it's just amazing how the film knows exactly when to be silent, when not to. I love the sound of the feet on the marble floor in these like corridors. Watching this chase, it just brings it home to me that to have a great chase, it's not about making the characters sprint as fast as they can, as close to each other. That's not what makes a great chase. The characters in this, they're going really slow, actually. Peter's kind of, you know, going from one place to the next, looking around, not sure where his escape route is, and the gunslinger's mostly walking around with his hands in his gun belt, walking really slow, but despite the slowness, it's a brilliant chase. If the film has a weakness, it's in the first half of the movie, because as much as it is fun watching Peter and John do all these reenactments, it does go on a little bit long for me. I mean, when they first have the fight with the gunslinger in the bar, that's really exciting, watching Peter gather up his courage to take that guy down. And then the little section with the prostitute is interesting as well. But then when we get to Peter ending up in the sheriff's office, that's the point where I'm getting a little bit fidgety. I want some kind of plot development or something different. And certainly by the time you get to the big mass bar brawl, I'm totally ready for something else. So I think this film could have done with having another subplot, a substantial subplot to go alongside the constant reappearing of Yul Brynner at every turn. Possibly this film needed a good, strong female character, because there isn't really any female character at all in this. You can't really count the prostitute robots. They get like one or two lines and that's it. But this film definitely seems to think that it is a big dilemma for Peter as to whether he's going to sleep with a prostitute. And I kind of think, not really, because even if he was in a relationship, you know, as far as a woman's concerned, they would still consider it cheating, whether you slept with a robot prostitute or a real prostitute. So, and we have sex dolls and things in real life. So the fact that Peter sleeps with this prostitute and his buddy sleeps with one as well, it's not like a massive thing, really. It's not like a big wow thing. I think what would have been a lot more interesting would have been if Peter had had some kind of relationship with a woman in this film, a robot, and throughout the film he would have had the dilemma of, am I letting this go a little bit too far? I'm getting a little bit too emotionally involved with this robot. And then you could have had an ending where, because he's seen the chaos that the robots have caused, then he has to maybe shoot that woman down, maybe. We get a bit at the end of this where Peter, after he's finished off Yul Brynner, he finds a woman chained up in the medieval world, and initially he rescues her thinking it's a real woman, and then the realization comes to him that it's a robot, so he either puts her down or he leaves her, I can't remember which, but this could have been the climax to a subplot where Peter had been getting to know a woman throughout the film and getting really close to her, and his friends kind of chastising him for, you know, making too much of this whole thing. I think you actually do get that in the TV show from what I can remember, but it could have been done in this film just in a more minuscule way, you know, just have a few scenes now and again, having Peter getting to know a woman, and it causes him a few emotional difficulties at the end of the film. That could have been the big emotional punch just to finish things off after Yul Brynner was taken care of. So that's the only minor thing I would have changed about this film. Just dial back on the reenactments a little bit, around about the halfway point, and just put a good female character into the mix, a robot, obviously. The casting is interesting in this. So we've got James Brolin playing one of the main good guys, and he looks every inch the movie star in this film. He was almost cast as James Bond once. In fact, he was cast as James Bond, but then Roger Moore decided at the last minute that he wasn't going to retire, so Brolin was quietly nudged aside, but by all intents and purposes, James Brolin was James Bond very, very briefly. He just didn't get to be in a movie. But interestingly, in this film, Brolin is killed off halfway through this. He's not the guy, he's not the hero who goes forward to the big finale. That honour falls to Richard Benjamin, who doesn't really come across that much like a movie star. He's a bit of an everyman sort of a character. He reminds me of an actor called Patrick Burgin to look at him, mainly because of the moustache, but it somehow seems fitting in this movie, I guess, that the lesser star goes forward to face off against Yul Brynner, because, you know, this is a fake fantasy world where, you know, dreams are becoming reality. So I guess, you know, the guy who would normally be the big star takes a back seat in this one, whereas somebody like Richard Benjamin gets to be the big hero. Even I reckon I could get up on stage and do some kind of accurate Richard Benjamin impression. Brolin, maybe not so much. But both guys do a terrific job in this film. They do have a nice little chemistry while they're together. Yul Brynner is amazing as the gunslinger, honestly. He's really frightening in this. I've not really seen Brynner in anything, I don't think, but just the look of him, I mean, it's something else. He's really imposing. He's really stocky, like to the point where even if he was just playing a normal man chasing Richard Benjamin towards the end, I still think that would be very, very terrifying for Benjamin. It's interesting his position in this film, the gunslinger, as the main villain, because he's a joke for like the first hour. Like the characters are just relentlessly shooting him up at every opportunity, and this robot, I should say, can do absolutely nothing about it. And then suddenly he changes on a dime with about half an hour to go and becomes the most terrifying thing ever. But this is not what's normally done in movies, because normally the main villain, a movie will go out of its way to show you how evil the villain is very, very quickly. You know, often the first scene for a villain, they'll be killing an underling or doing something really nasty, you know, or force choking somebody to death in a meeting, something. But in this film, the gunslinger is just a complete and utter joke for like the longest time. And the only film I can think of which is like this is Goldfinger, where James Bond is just taking the piss out of Goldfinger at cards and golf and just making an idiot out of him. And then suddenly, on a whim, whoa, this terrifying villain appears in the next scene who's almost cutting Bond's balls off with a laser. So that film's kind of similar in a way, but it's not usually the done thing. So to see it done like this in Westworld is kind of curious for me. Some of the lesser characters in this, the fringe characters are really funny to watch. That's where you get the comic relief in Westworld. So, like I said earlier, every now and again we check in on events in medieval world and Roman world. So we get to watch this one guy in medieval world who is playing out some kind of role play where he's trying to bed the queen behind the king's back, and he's making a total hash of it. But that's the fun of these characters, because they're absolutely awful even in role play. You know, you'd think these people would turn up at somewhere like this, and because they know they're going to win all the battles and the gunfights and the sword fights, and because they know they're going to be able to sleep with whoever they want, you'd think they'd have the confidence to just be somebody that they're not normally, but that doesn't seem to be the case with some of these guys. Like, they still seem really unsure of themselves and really, not very confident at all. So that's just part of the fun of these little side scenes, like the guy in Medieval World in particular. I really enjoy watching any scene that he's in. Like at one point, he sneaks into the Queen's bedroom behind the King's back, and then somehow sneaks his way back out again without sleeping with her. So we've reached that point where I will quickly show you the version of the film that I've got. Here is my Blu-ray copy of Westworld, and it's a fantastic transfer. It looks absolutely tip-top in this format. Special features, there are a few, but not many, and they're not actually listed on the back of this box for some reason, but I did notice them in the menus. There's like a behind-the-scenes footage thing, and maybe something else, some trailers, something. There's a few little bits and pieces in the menu because I spotted them, but I didn't actually check any of them out, and I don't know why they're not listed on the back of the box, but they're just not. But anyway, that's my copy. But for now, let's crack on to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4.5 bloody axes out of 5. That is probably the best score I've given for quite some time. In fact, I was very close to calling this a masterpiece, but I think the fact that the plot slows down around about the midpoint just kind of prevents me from giving that perfect score. One really boring scene I didn't mention is when it gets to night time and we see all the Delos assistants come out with all their spotlights and things, and they're carting the bodies of robots away. That scene drags on a little bit too long, and I just don't think it was really necessary. This is the sort of thing that maybe you can get away with in the TV show, but in the movie version, I'm just not sure it was necessary. And plus, all the stuff I went into about the fact that there's no real female character in this film, just to bulk the film out a bit, I think that has contributed to me passing up on the chance to give out a masterpiece rating. But still, 4.5 out of 5. This is a movie I still think is great. I absolutely love it. It's a very, very original film, and highly recommended. This Blu-ray, I think it cost me £8 on Blu-ray, brand new. So if you've never seen 1973 Westworld, absolutely give it a shot. And I'll be back very, very soon to review the sequel, Future World. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.